Hello, on behalf of Humboldt State University's ENGR 535 class, I'm going to show you how to build a do-it-yourself air filter today using materials you can find at a hardware store. We have here one box fan. This box fan is in the box. We're actually going to use the box too. We have two air filters, and I'll talk briefly about these in 1 minute. And we have duct tape. In addition, we're going to have two tools today. We have a pair of scissors and a marking device. A Sharpie would probably be perfect, but I have a pencil and that's what I'm going to use. Altogether, these items, not including the scissors and the pencil, cost about $80. Part of that is due to buying some pretty expensive duct tape. This was $10. You can buy a roll of duct tape for $5, but I think we really want this duct tape to hold, so I went for the kind of expensive high-end duct tape. The fan is just a simple 20-inch box fan. You can find them at Target, Home Depot, Lowe's, or Ace Hardware, or probably your mom and pop neighborhood hardware store if you have it. And the most important thing is these filters. So the filters I have here are rated MERV 13, and it says it right on the back. MERV 13 is what we're going to recommend as the ideal filter for filtering out wildfire smoke. You can see on the back it's going to filter between 62 and 87% of particles between 0.3 microns and 3 microns, which is kind of the size range we care about most. These I got from Lowe's. If you're at Home Depot, they don't typically carry filters with a MERV rating. They use what's called an FPR rating, which is proprietary to Home Depot. It's kind of annoying actually. And they don't seem to correlate perfectly to MERV ratings. But the best information we could find on the web is that a MERV 13 filter, which is what this is equivalent to about an FPR 10 filter at Home Depot. I would recommend you try to find MERV rated filters, but if you can't, go with FPR 10. These filters are 20 inches by 20 inches by 1 inch, and one of the 20s is super important. You have to have a 20-inch filter, but they vary. You could have a 20 by 25 or a 20 by 16 or a 20 by 14, depending what you can find. And 1 inch is pretty much the thinnest, 2 inches would be fine, but I think 1 are the most available. So what I've done is very carefully open this box. I didn't want to tear it because, as I mentioned, we'll be using it later. And I even more carefully opened these filters. As I've said, these are kind of the heart of the device. We really don't want to poke any holes in them when we remove the packaging. So the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to check the direction that this fan blows, just by plugging it in and turning it on. Okay. So I can feel this high pressure on this side. So this is the outlet, and this feels like the inlet, which is good. And this is pretty important, particularly with this fan that is purchased at Lowe's, because it has the dial on the front. If you have the dial on the front, it means we have to put the filters on the back. So we're going to be mounting these filters like so, because if we put them on the front, once we put them on, you wouldn't be able to reach the dial and turn the fan on. And you really want to put the filters on the inlet, and the reason for that is that the low pressure is going to suck everything together. If you put them on the high pressure side, the outlet, it's going to try to push itself apart when you turn it on, and that means it's not going to seal as well, and it's potentially going to just fall apart with use. So that is great, and if you have pretty much any other fan, so a fan from Home Depot or a fan from Target, it's going to have the knob on the top, and then you can choose the right side regardless. One thing that's going to be challenging about this fan is that the cord comes out the back, and we're going to be building a kind of duct on the back of it that has to be sealed. So we're going to have to tape around this cord. If the cord were to come out the side, the front, or the bottom, that wouldn't be an issue at all, but for this particular fan, it is going to be a little bit of a challenge. So we've talked about the orientation of the fan. The fan blows in this direction. Now the filter has an arrow on it indicating the direction of flow. So because air is going this direction, I want to orient the filter like this, with the arrow pointing towards the fan. So having chosen the filter orientation properly now, I'm just going to set the filter. It's roughly centered top to bottom on the fan, and it's adjacent to the left side. Then I'm going to use a couple pieces of duct tape to just hold it in place. And apparently this very expensive duct tape is a little bit hard to tear, so I'm just going to use the scissors to cut it. Now the duct tape actually serves two purposes. One, it holds everything together, and two, it seals it. This is designed to seal ducts, and it's going to seal here. So the first thing though I'm going to do is just use small pieces to hold everything in place. I'm gonna push it flush here and put one little piece here. I will cut myself another piece of duct tape. And I'll do the same thing over here. And later we'll add more duct tape, which will reinforce it, and it'll also seal it so there are no gaps. Okay, so now I've made this little hinge. I'm gonna open the hinge, and I'm gonna repeat the same process with the other filter on the other side. So again, we're gonna check the orientation. We're gonna lay the filter roughly centered top to bottom. Actually, as well centered as possible. We really want it to be in line with this other filter, and then adjacent to the side. And as I do it, I'm gonna push it down so that it sits flush. As I tape it, which I haven't done yet, I'll cut another piece of tape. Very gently push it down so it's sitting flush here, and get a nice piece of tape there, and one final piece of tape here. Okay, so we've put the two filters on, and we've just stood the fan up. And I'm actually not even using the feet, but there's some feet you can pop out that would probably be wise to use. Now, the last thing I'm gonna do is put about 2 more pieces of tape on the back in just the same way as I did before, and then we're going to seal that up later. Once everything's fully tacked together with small pieces of tape, then we'll put seams of tape. So I'm gonna gently push it all flush. I'm just gonna put a little piece of tape in there, hold it nicely, and one more piece near the bottom. So what I'm doing is I'm kind of creasing the tape so I can get it all the way into this corner as far as possible. Push everything flush. Oh, this is a little challenging. Let's see if we can do it. So we'll get it on one piece, and then get it off my hands, line it up, and there we go. We get like a nice, the tape's all the way into the corner, and then we'll fold it around the corner here. And to belabor the point, these are just to tack everything in place, and we will be reinforcing and sealing everything later. So now we have our nice triangle, nice stable design. The next thing we're gonna do is grab our box. We're going to cut triangles of the box and tape them here and on the other side. Because we're using the box, I'm gonna very carefully separate it. So I found the seam, and I'm just breaking it open here. That way we have as much cardboard as possible. This particular box has some tape on the bottom, and because it's not fancy duct tape, I can very easily just peel this tape off. Get that out of here. Okay, so I've just set this on the box, and I've set it such that all the seams are kind of as far outside of the design as possible, because I don't want to use the seams if I can avoid them. Now I'm just going to start by taking the pencil and marking the inside corners, 3 of them, with my pencil. Again, a Sharpie would even be better. And I can see that I've got a little bit of seam over here and over here. It doesn't really look like there's much I can do about that. I'm just gonna have to deal with it. So now I've marked those points. I'm gonna make some marks on the outside. Should just draw this pencil across here as carefully as I can. Gonna do the same thing on the other side. And these don't need to be perfect, they're just gonna guide us for when we're cutting it. Then on the fan side, I don't really want the cardboard to extend all the way to the back of the fan, so I'm gonna mark inside on the fan side, and just to remember later that I have to mark another couple inches past that so that I have something to attach to. Okay, so that's done. Okay, so I've cheated a little bit. I've used this pen to mark here, so hopefully you can see it. It's not really necessary for me to see it, but it is necessary for it to show up in the video. Actually don't have a Sharpie in the entire house, or I would have used that and you could see it really well. So, I'm also gonna cheat again, and I'm gonna use this straight edge. You can use any sort of straight line device, even probably a piece of cardboard, but I have this one, so I'm gonna use it. And I'm gonna lay that here, because remember, we're moving this line back. And this is a pretty good amount. the distance to move it back. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lay it parallel on this side, and then I'm going to mark on the opposite side. I'm going to extend these lines out, and then everywhere there are these straight lines, I'm just going to run them out to complete the whole triangle. Got the scissors, and I'm just going to cut this triangle out. Let's be careful to stay away from this piece as much as possible because we are going to need to use it. So I'm going to start cutting here. Okay, so I can see that my piece of cardboard fits pretty well. I've got plenty of extra material on the sides, and I'm going to go ahead and trim that off a little later, but there's no real reason to do it now. I can actually kind of fold these corners down, and it looks like that might work really well for me to fill in these little gaps where the fan is rounded. So the next step, I'm going to take this, and I'm just going to use it to trace a second triangle, and then I'm going to cut that out. And of course I should mention that if you are using a fan that you just have it around the house, it probably doesn't have a box anymore. You'll just have to find another cardboard box, or you can buy them at Home Depot for about $2. Just make sure you get one with 2 dimensions of 20 inches or more. So you need a 20 by 20 by 15 box would be fine, but a 16 by 16 by 16 box would not work. So we've chosen to use 2 filters and space them off the back versus just taping one to the back. That has a few advantages. First, I can use non-20 by 20 filters. I could use a 20 by 24 and put them, you'd have a longer triangle, but if you had a 20 by 24, it'd be hanging off the edge, it wouldn't seal well. A 20 by 16 wouldn't work at all, but you could build the same thing with 2 20 by 16 filters. So this is a more flexible design. But more importantly, we were concerned if you taped the filter to the back here, that it might cause overheating by slowing the airflow around the center. Because these are spaced off, the airflow is going to be slowed in this area, but by the time it reaches the fan, it'll kind of be back up to a nice smooth flow through the fan. Another advantage is that we have more surface area here, and more surface area on the filters means a higher flow rate through the fan, which means faster cleaning of your air. It also means more money. So these filters are not cheap, they're 20 bucks a piece, and this design will cost you, $20 more than the single filter design. Okay, so I have my 2 triangular cutouts, 1, 2, and I have my pre-taped fan and filter combination. I'm going to take these cutouts. This has a little bit of an unfortunate line on it, and I don't like the outside of this, so I'm going to flip it over like so, and then put this one on the bottom to erase the marks we made on it. This one has fewer marks, and they're less visible. So I'm simply going to line this up here, and I want to make sure to have a little bit of overlap. I don't want this to be touching like this. I want to get a good overlap so I have some strength there. So I'll overlap maybe half the width of the filter on both sides. Got it about in place. I'm going to cut myself some tape and just repeat what I've been doing this whole time, starting with finding the edge of the duct tape. Then we'll cut. And I'm starting with the top here for a couple reasons. Actually, really just for one reason, and the reason is I don't want to deal with this tail yet. I want to get my practice on this one that's going to be a little easier, which is the top side, and then I'll figure out exactly how I'm going to tape around the fantail. So there's one piece of tape. Two pieces of tape, and I'm pushing it down so it's nice and flush here as I apply the tape. It seems to hold nicely, and then I'll just put one more piece of tape here. I'm happy with this amount of overlap with the fan. You don't really need this much. I've probably got about half the fan width, but I'm fine with that, so I'm going to go ahead and tape that to the fan. Maybe I'll use a little bit of a bigger piece here. There's not really any reason to do that, but I'm going to do it anyway. And again, I'm going to push it nice and flush, try to seal my tape here. Okay, so we have these little gaps here, which we have to deal with because the fan is curved here. And the way I'm going to deal with that is I'm going to gently press this down so it follows the contour of the fan, and then I'm going to put a nice piece of tape on it. There's a little bit of a gap here, but this gap is quite small, and we can easily just cover that with a piece of tape. So I've sort of pre-bent that. It's gonna spring back when I release it. I'm gonna get myself now, a 6-inch piece of tape or so, and I can just lay that on here, I think, and then kind of starting from one end, just gently hold that down there. That seems to have worked pretty well, and I think I'm pretty happy that I bought this expensive, thick, tacky tape because it's doing a really nice job holding everything in place, and the color kind of matches the fan as well, which is not a bad thing. Okay, so now we're on the bottom side. I simply finished tacking the top and flipped the project over. Now, as I mentioned, we have this cord, which is going to give us our first challenge. These feet on this particular fan are also going to be a bit of a challenge, but I think they can also be a little bit of an opportunity. So I'll show you how we can use them to our advantage in a minute. So I'm going to take this cord, just bring it, and we're gonna have that cord exit outside of that pocket, and then we'll tape it. In fact, I might just tape that now. That's probably a reasonable thing to do. So I'll go ahead and tape that into place. Just here. Just stick a little piece of tape on that. We can always move it if we have to. If we regret our decision, all these things can be reversed. Okay. So now I'm gonna carefully think about this. So we have our ears where the natural bends in the box were. I'm gonna put those on the sides as I did with the previous one. Now this piece is actually too big, and that's because these feet limit how far back we can move it. So I'm gonna have to shrink this one up, and we'll think about how much we wanna do that. So as with the top side, I want this to be like so, about half the filter width. And that puts us here. And just looking at how much room there is, we're right about that original line. Actually, it looks like it's going to be pretty good. The bottom side, if you remember, that line was here, but since I've pushed this whole thing back, that line now sits right around here, which is just about where I want it. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to cut this cardboard where that line is. Hopefully we don't regret this decision, but if we do, we can always tape a patch over it or something. And this is the bottom side, so it's not going to be that much of an eyesore. So I've cut this, as I said I would, right on that line, and it looks like it's right on, pretty much right on the money. So I'm going to align this, and I promised earlier that these feet would present an opportunity, so I'll demonstrate the opportunity they present, which is this. They can hold it in place while we work. And it's kind of hard, they barely slide over it. That'll help us tape it in place exactly where we want it. And it also lets us know that once we assemble this thing, we are going to be able to use these feet, although they're really unnecessary because we have now this triangular design. We don't really need the feet at all. Could probably go ahead and remove these, although I don't see exactly how to do it on this design except by force. The fan you're working with, and of course, may or may not have feet like this. Anyway, it's the long way of saying it's time to tack this down. Here we go. I'm going to follow the exact same procedure. And I said I said it's about half. That's a pretty rough estimate. It doesn't need to be perfect. I think it's good to have a little bit of extra contact area here. Meaning some overlap, but not total overlap, I think is ideal. There we go. Careful with this tape that you're not covering the filter. It's not a huge deal if you do, but it's not optimal. You want the most exposed filter area possible. We're paying top dollar for this expensive filter material. We don't want to cover it up with tape. I'm gonna do it over here on this side. And of course, since I have these feet locking it in place, I don't really actually need to tape here, but I'm gonna go ahead and do it anyway. Actually, when I go ahead and seal this whole thing, I'm gonna need to rotate the feet back to do so. So I do really need to do this. And now, since I've cut these short, we actually don't really, if I had thought a little bit better, I might have left a little bit of a tail here, but I didn't. So we can't really do the same thing we did on the top side. again fold it a little bit, and it looks like the gap here is really not too bad again. So I think we're going to be in okay shape. I'm just going to put a little bit of tape to kind of hold this down. Go ahead and demonstrate that. Let's take our tape, put it here, and then gingerly kind of push this down. Okay. Okay, so now I'm on the top side. This thing's all attached together. Feels super sturdy, that beautiful triangular shape. Kind of feels like I could sit on this, but I might destroy the filter, so I'm not going to demonstrate that. What I am going to do is I'm going to go ahead and seal everything up. And this is probably the most challenging seam, although I think in the end it's not really going to matter. Because if I put tape on it, it wouldn't sit flat in here. I'm going to do what I did with these pieces here and push it into the gaps. And actually one more thing I'm going to do is I'm going to try to trim these little tails off so I don't get in the way. Here. That's good enough. A box cutter might be helpful there if you have a box cutter, although the scissors seem to do just fine. And then at this point, I'm going to kind of measure my tape out. So we want to get this as close to edge as possible, which is just about here. And I think this is also where the actual taping is going to start becoming a challenge. With these little pieces, it was pretty easy to tape, but with these big pieces, I really want this in the gap. I'm gonna push it in. And now these are all cosmetic. Now we're gonna be seeing it. So I really want to do as good of a job as I can. Unfortunately, that's not actually a very good job. So it's pretty crinkly. It's folding over here, but not on the other side. Pretty asymmetrical. Not a big deal though. It looks like I've done a good enough job. There's a pretty big border here, so you have a lot of room for error. And I haven't gone over the edge here. It looks like I have good contact area all over. Where I do have these kind of ugly crinkles that I made due to being a bad tape applicator, I'm going to try to smooth those out because we don't really want any leak paths. You know, it's not the end of the world if you have a small leak. It's, you know, even if you accidentally stuck a pencil through this and put a hole in it, it's just going to suck air and it's not going to clean that air, but there's still going to be air getting cleaned through the rest of the filter. So not the end of the world, but of course something to avoid. And now I've done that seam, I've got a lot more to go. Let's just start with this one. We'll do the fan ones first. Same deal. Actually, this one's similar in that we have this angle. So these are some of the harder seams. These ones should be a little easier. I'm just folding over the edge. Here we go. Again, I'm gonna try to measure it out kind of by eye. To about here. And place this down. Now I have less contact area on this edge. I'm going to try a little bit of a different strategy and align the tape up on this side. The tape does what it wants to, but I'm going to push it down here and then over here. Here we go. This looks pretty nice. Here we go. I'm just continuing, to measure and cut these edges. We have a lot of them, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Looks like we have 9 edges if I count that out. I'm sure there's some mathematical or geometric principle that would allow me to shorthand that and know how many edges, but counting seems to get the job done as well. Okay, and I'm pressing this tape in. I'm really happy with this tape that I've chosen by 3M. If you want to think about sponsorship money, this might be a good place. I could be sponsored. The 3M duct tape seems to be really forming nicely. It is, it's attaching really well. It seems to be sticking, and it doesn't look half bad. So no regrets on my selection of premium duct tape here. So now we've done 3 sides, kind of the 2 fan adjacent edges in the corner. So really now we have the top and bottom to do. I'm just gonna continue doing what I'm doing. Those were the hard ones, as I said. Now we're getting to the easy ones, which is, it's nice for me. This one, I don't even need to cut it yet. Just go make sure I get the whole edge up until my next piece of tape. Have some overlap with that tape, and then we'll just cut it. This is easy, we're on the home stretch here. What could go wrong? Okay, measure this one out again. Give myself a little extra here. Doesn't seem like it's too much trouble to kind of fold this over. So, and you can see here we're pretty close. So I'm gonna actually start this one like this on this face. Make sure we're sealing on a nice big face, and then bend it over the edge. And remember, I'm pushing it down. I'm trying to get everything flush so that the tape isn't. I want as few areas as possible where all that's filling a hole is tape. I want the tape to be holding it together, but not to be filling a gap. I want that gap to be pressed down by this stronger cardboard material. That's going to give us a better seal, and yeah, it's going to give us a better seal and better air cleaning, certainly more durability. Okay, the sixth edge is almost done. So here we go. I'm going to lay it here again. I'm really paying attention to make sure that the tape is going to touch both surfaces. I'll seal it down here, and then I'm going to push the cardboard flush and fold it over. I think good taping is going to be really important here. It's a little ugly in this corner. We might deal with that by putting another piece of tape on top of it, or we might just let it be. Doesn't seem like it'll be a functional issue. Okay. So now what is this? This is the top side. The top side is complete. The edges are complete, so we just gotta flip it over and deal with the bottom. We'll do this side last. This is gonna be a little bit of a challenge with the feet, but I think it will be one that we are ready for by the time we've had all this duct tape practice. Here we go, measuring again. Getting a little fuzz on this tape. If you have long hair, could consider using a hair tie. Although the hairs won't really be an issue. For this type of application, that will create a minuscule leak path, but as I've talked about before, small leak paths aren't the end of the world. We just want as much air as possible going through the filter, which means reducing the leak paths as much as we can do. Take this one over here. 7. We're on the home stretch now. This is really exciting. I'm gonna get to turn this thing on soon. And after that, we're gonna do some tests on its performance. We have a purple air filter in this room, so I can fill the room with smoke, and then I can monitor how long it takes this filter to reduce the particulate level to whatever level I want, say from 200 ppm, not 200 ppm, 200 micrograms per cubic meter of PM 2.5 particles, down to say 10. See how long that takes, and I'm going to compare it to not an industrial air filter, to a commercial air filter. Okay, we have a tiny little gap here. Again, not the end of the world, but we're here, we've got the duct tape. We might as well just put a little piece over that so that we don't have a little bit of air freely flowing through there and not getting cleaned. Okay, let's turn it this way. So this, if what we're doing is running a mile, that's 4 laps over 400 meter track plus 9 meters at the end. We're at the 100 meter mark from the end. This is the final sprint. We are putting this last piece of tape on. I put these down. I'm going to cut this one a little longer than it might need to be, because one thing I don't want to do is when I put these up, I don't want to grab the edge of the tape. The corner of the tape is much easier to lift off. So I want to make sure the corner goes by that, and I'm going to put it about as close as I can without bunching it up, because if it bunches up, then it's going to be more in the way. So I'm gonna try to get this piece particularly smooth. So far, doing a good job. Can line up, look at this, with one finger, oh, and now we have a big ripple, perfect, right on time. Okay. Yeah. So there's not a ton of overlap between the tape and the plastic here, but I do have my ace in the hole here. I have these feet which are gonna hold everything flush. So I think we're in pretty good shape. Looks like everything's taped up. It looks, you know, pretty good. Now we're gonna plug it in and turn it on and see what happens. So let's start with low. Can sort of feel something happening, it's very hard to feel, but of course air is coming out. Quite a lot of air actually. This feels just kind of by eye, similar to when I turned it on the first time. And of course by eye, I mean by hand. Turn it up to high. Getting a good amount of airflow, which is a really good sign. You know, these higher MERV rated filters, there's a lot of filtration going on, so they're going to be slowing that air down. They're going to be creating a pressure drop across them. It's going to reduce the airflow rate. So I was concerned with such a high quality, I guess, a high quality filter that we'd be slowing the flow rate too much, but it doesn't look like we have. One thing to think about is that this cord is coming out the front now, which is not ideal. It actually would have been nice to kind of bring it down along the bottom. Perhaps if you're doing this at home, you might think about routing this cord in a different direction. But, you know, we've got what appears to be a working filter here for the low price of $80 and about an hour to assemble this thing, including lots of time that was spent just doing takes for the filming. So if you're pretty quick, you could probably assemble this thing in about 30 minutes and be ready to go. And as I've said, this was everything here, all the materials, not the tools, were purchased at Lowe's. You can get very similar stuff at Home Depot, probably Ace Hardware as well. So this is pretty easy in wildfire season. If you can't find an air filter online, if Amazon's out of stock, you should be able to just stop by Home Depot and pick up some of these pretty common items and build yourself an air filter. Thanks for watching.